Welcome to In Their Shoes by Seanchoíche. I'm Gaff.
And I'm Bex. We're here to help people connect through the power of shared storytelling.
In this podcast, we invite two people to tell a story about their life. Instead of reading their own story, they'll swap and they'll read each other's as if it was their own.
After both stories are finished, we will dive into the real questions to be asked, feelings that came up, and more moments that have maybe never been shared before.
Come with us as we experience walking in each other's shoes and immersing ourselves in each other's stories. This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover.
With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected so you can explore incredible movies, streaming anytime, anywhere. Today I'm recommending the film Zero Fucks Given by Emmanuel Mari and Julia Lacustre that's now streaming in the UK and Ireland on Mubi, because it really links with our theme of fear that's on the podcast today, and it's more around the fear of the unknown, because it's centred around our character Cassandra, who's a flight attendant in her 20s, and she really doesn't know who she is, but like the title of the film, she gives zero fucks at this point until she loses her job and then is made to sort of face the idea of figuring out who she is. And I feel that we all go through this in our 20s, and it becomes sort of an underlying fear because a lot of the time we don't know who we are and it takes a long time to figure out. So another thing that I loved about this film was that actually everyone that plays roles in it has those roles in real life. All the flight attendants are actual flight attendants, and a lot of the film was improv, so a lot of the text was just happy accidents. And you can stream this movie free for 30 days on mubi.com/Seanchoíche. That's mubi.com/SEANCHOICHE to stream the best of cinema for a whole month. While I was fearing it, it came, but came with less of fear, because the fearing it so long had almost made it dear. There is a fitting a dismay, a fitting a despair. 'Tis harder knowing it is due than knowing it is here. The trying on the utmost, the morning it is new, is terribler than wearing it a whole existence through. So that is The Inevitable by Emily Dickinson.
Bravo. Sounded great.
Thank you.
If you haven't been able to figure it out, guys, the theme of this episode is fear. And myself and Bex are delighted to have two extraordinary guests. I had to do it. I'm so sorry, guys. We have the wonderful Máiréad Tyers and Sofia Oxenham in the studios today here in London for our episode of In Their Shoes by Seanchoíche. Máiréad Tyers graduated drama school in 2020 and landed a number of small roles in TV and film. But more recently, she's become known and loved as Jen in Disney Plus series Extraordinary, a story about being in a world where everyone gets a superpower by their 18th birthday. But Jen remains powerless. For its first series, she received a BAFTA nomination.
Woo!
Let's
How
go.
did you, Missy?
Well, with us as well, we have Sofia Oxenham. She's a Cornish actress and graduated from RADA in 2017. Oxenham's television roles have included Tess Tregadin on BBC's Poldark and Idis, on Netflix Cursed, as well as parts on Doc Martin, Dracula, Grantchester and For Life. She has also appeared in the film Running Mates and in several stage plays. She's currently plays Carrie on the Disney Plus series Extraordinary. For its first season, she also received a BAFTA nomination.
So we have two BAFTA nominees in our midst.
That is huge.
Sponsored by BAFTA. Sponsored by BAFTA and Extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Yeah.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you in.
Yeah.
It's great to have people that you kind of already know in as well. But sometimes it's a little bit more nerve-wracking, but I think it's because I've been up since 5 or because your presence is very comforting that I'm not actually that nervous to have you guys
But you
today.
look very well. You've
You
got a
look
little
so fresh.
like a tan about
Yeah,
you.
the Italian sun.
Yes.
We were very lucky. We were running Seanchoíche at a music festival down in Tuscany last weekend. So
I also look very tan. Right? For me, this is quite good.
How did it go?
it was beautiful. Yeah, it was quite scary because, like, obviously when we run Seanchoíche at music festivals, we're relying quite heavily on our followers who, you know, when they want, like basically the way we get speakers at our music festivals is they will submit their story and then we give them a free ticket to a festival, and that's fine if the festival is taking place in Ireland or in the UK where the majority of our followers are based. But because this event was taking place in Italy, like that's a bigger trek. You know, we're not able to pay for their flights and stuff, but we can't pay for their tickets to the festival. So we didn't have that many people apply to speak. Like we only had 4 people in the first day and 3 people in the second day. But then during the festival, people were just so inspired and they decided to get up and tell their stories, and we ended up having like 10 people each session. And it was great. Like, it was a really beautiful setting. The weather was phenomenal. And then also just because it was a small festival, like 1,000 people there, it's a really nice way of people getting to know each other and like just getting like throughout the weekend, then you'd have someone come up to you and be like, your story's amazing. Like, you know, I was in the same position as well in my life. And it was just a really nice way of relating to people and getting to know people as well.
Oh,
so
was it a big festival or was it like...
There was around 1,000 people there, but some big acts. They've been running for 5 years. It's called Flash Festival. And they're basically, they're based in London, the guys that run it. They're an Australian and Italian couple, but she's from that area in Tuscany. And for the past 5 years, they've been running it every year. And during the day, it's like Italian pasta making by Italian nonnas and like wine tasting and Tuscan feasts and stuff. And then in the evening, then it's like Italo disco and techno and house.
That
So
sounds amazing.
yeah, it's a beautiful like kind of decline into debauchery that starts very elegantly in Italian.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's nice.
There was a lot of emotion. Like, I have to say, there was 4 girls sitting next to me through the Seanchoíche, and they bawled their eyes out the whole way through it. Like, even in parts where it wasn't even emotional, they just wouldn't stop crying. I think everyone was slightly delicate from the night before, so it was like a nice little, everyone came together and just sort of
Bonding.
Yeah.
just poured their hearts out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Has there been loads of people really connecting from the
Yeah.
beginning and like having like some incredible stories, relationships, stuff
Yeah,
like that?
you were
Different.
telling me relationships.
Yeah,
That's
there's a
gorgeous.
couple. It's actually if you're listening to this episode, can you please send me a DM because I've lost your DM. But a girl did write to me saying that she and her second date at the time were at an event in
You're
Belfast.
going to say second husband?
No, their second date. Like they're on their second date. They went to Seanchoíche, and I'm pretty sure they were in Belfast or they were in Donegal. But there's a photo of them that we posted to Instagram months ago, and she was like, "Is there any way you can send me that because we're now boyfriend and girlfriend?" But I can't find the message, and I also don't remember which photo it was that she
They might be
was.
broke up by now.
That's what I'm worried about. Yeah, but yeah, we've had people kind of come on dates and end up going out. We've had some really good friendships formed through Seanchoíche as well.
Like us?
Like us.
Yeah, like you
precisely.
two are a
Yeah.
shining example.
Yeah,
Work
exactly.
relationships and friendships.
Yeah, exactly. Doing it all. Well, almost all. We're not in a romantic relationship yet. I don't think.
People at the festival
I know,
thought we were.
it was hilarious.
Which I was like, wait,
Yeah.
are you cock blocking me?
The gaydar doesn't. Yeah, true. Actually, the gaydar just doesn't travel very well. It actually doesn't. The gaydar does not travel well. People don't realize I'm gay in foreign languages or in
Really?
different. Yeah,
Is that a cultural thing, I suppose?
must
Is it-
be. Yeah, I think in Ireland, if you're in any way
Yeah.
gesticular,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
just immediately categorized as gay. Whereas in Italy, obviously,
In that
the-
accent, it's all gay.
whereas in Italy, it's a little bit different.
But you two became friends through working together, or did you know each other beforehand?
We didn't. I was aware of Fee because Fia would have graduated drama school the year before I.
Yeah.
She would have graduated and I arrived in the same year, so we just missed each other. Which I like. I kind of think back now. I think it was probably a good
agree.
thing, wasn't it? Because
Yeah.
then we just met each other like on Extraordinary as like a level playing field, and
Because they always have kind of like, 'cause sadly at drama school, even if someone's like 1 year above you, there's these weird like hierarchies where you don't talk to people. You could be the same age,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
years don't seem to mix as much. And I think,
no, I know.
yeah, it was nice that we came on to the job and it was just even
Yeah.
playing field.
I remember
and
so
no
clearly
history.
when like we first met, and like I remember what you were wearing and everything, like so distinctly. It was in the we were
Was I
having
wearing a
chemistry
mini skirt
reads.
for an
You were wearing a
audition?
fucking mini skirt, which I have never seen you wear since. I was like, you must have been dressing for the part and for the
was
time.
very
and a
short as
lovely
well.
blue cardi, baby blue cardi.
But I feel
A
like
vision.
now that feels a bit different. I just don't know if I'd wear a really short mini skirt.
You were selling yourself.
I wanted the bar.
Yeah, you wanted the part.
Did you guys have much of a, what's the word? I guess like orientation period before you went into the roles, or did you meet at audition stage, or did you meet at once you'd gotten the parts stage?
Well, I think, Máiréad, you already had the part, right?
Yes, at that stage, yeah.
And then they were chemistry reading me, Bilal, and Luke, who play Luke plays Jislord and Bilal plays Cash. They were chemistry reading. Oh no, not Jislord actually. They were chemistry reading me and Bilal.
Yes, yeah.
With Máiréad, because we were like all friends living in the same place, whatever. She'd already been cast, but that was, I think, it was our first chemistry read with her. But then it all happened quite quickly.
It was very quick, yeah.
By the end of the week.
I think it was.
I think that was on the Monday. By the
we
Friday.
read through then the following week, and then we met up.
Oh,
We
yeah.
messaged each other on Instagram going, can we go for a coffee before the read through? To like just have someone to walk in with. Like,
Scary.
help
walking into a room of like
yeah.
producers and everything. You know, I was terrified. It was so helpful having that. We met outside King's Cross on the
And we had a little coffee.
a Pret coffee.
And then we had like a 2-week rehearsal period where with these amazing acting coaches, and they really got us to bond and stuff. But to be honest, the night that it really
I knew it was going to
solidified
come off as soon as he asked. I knew it was going to come
was when we went out.
Yeah, we
Ah,
went
yeah.
out one night.
Assuming alcohol.
Got
was
kicked
involved.
out of
Everyone
Dawson
was sick.
Superstore.
No way.
But then we were like, okay, this is fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
firm.
yeah.
It was also because we ended up like staying in a friend of ours who we like only had just met as well. We all stayed in his place, and he lived in this guardianship in East London on Commercial Road that was like an abandoned hospital. And I remember just waking up at 5 a.m. going, where the fuck am I? And the panic of us the next morning going, we need to leave this place right now.
And you had to read through that morning.
No,
Oh,
no,
thank
that had already
You'd have the day
happened.
off.
Showbiz
Okay, okay.
weekend. Showbiz, baby.
What I love was the friend who was having us stay was like, once someone started being sick, and then he was like, oh God. Then someone else, he was like, no, not all of them. They're not
All 4 of us were just falling like flies. Yeah.
A domino effect. At least they were in a hospital, abandoned as it was. There's still some elements of
true.
remedy.
Yeah, the energy coming through there.
Have you guys seen the Phoebe Waller-Bridge series Crashing?
Yes.
I
Oh,
love
that reminds me
Crashing.
exactly
Yes.
of that. Yeah, have you seen that?
Yes.
So good,
It's
honestly.
amazing.
There's a hospital, like a former hospital across the road from where I live in London, and it looks exactly like the place where
Probably
that took
could
place.
be.
It could have been it
Yeah.
actually, yeah, but I always wonder what it would be like to like live in there with a load of my friends.
I know.
Well, it's supposed to put you off, but actually it put me onto it.
so
I know.
It's
Well,
like,
I think their one is actually quite nice. Like the
it
one
is.
we were in, like was grotty. Like, and it's like
yeah.
pumping music until 6 a.m. Like I think that's the vibe. It's people who can like do that long stint of
Yeah.
partying the whole
It's
time.
not for the
Otherwise-
faint-hearted.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
I love the scene in the first episode with you two where you like rub her head. I was like, oh, that must be like a very intimate thing to go in and like have to like soothe each other like that. Like even now you're friends, but like in an acting setting, I thought like that's quite intimate and lovely.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
I think that like the relationship with like because obviously in the show like Carrie channels my dead dad like in the show, so that's like a bonding in their relationship. And I think like when I don't know, yeah, like filming those scenes, particularly in the second season. I mean, I think that they're like I loved filming the scene in the second season, which I don't want to spoil if people haven't seen it, but
Spoiler alert, guys. If you haven't seen it, turn off
Turn it
30
down.
seconds.
But basically, I say goodbye to my like dad. It's a dysfunctional relationship. He's dead, and I'm talking to him through my best friend. And it's like I'm relying too heavily on her to, you know, maintain that relationship. It's dysfunctional and weird, so I have to let it go. And like when we were filming that scene, I feel like there was such like an understanding that day that we just knew it was going to be like a big thing and be really special. But like, there's no one I would have rather do it with. I think like we have our own friendship so much so outside the show anyway.
Yeah.
But doing something special like that, I think, just like forges a really like special connection. I think.
Because also your body doesn't know. Like if you're crying all
This is
day, your
such a
body
thing.
doesn't know. Your body thinks like, obviously your brain is like, we're not grieving Máiréad's dad.
Yeah, yeah.
But your body is like, oh my God, we're crying about the situation. So for that day, you feel like you're sharing something that brings you so much closer, so intimate.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're like, supporting. I mean, I don't know if that sounds really wanky, but that is.
No,
No, but that's sort of what I
Pretty
mean when I
fair.
watched
Yeah.
it. I was like, oh, that must be such a whether it's acting or not, it must feel
Yeah.
a lot,
Yeah.
you know.
It's
And
intimate.
Yeah.
There's so much metaphor in this show. At least, sorry, I'm looking at this show very analogously when I watch it. And like, you know, even I was talking to my friends the other day about like what are the modern day superpowers that people in East London at the age of 28, 29 have that I don't. And like those are like mortgages, stable relationships, financial security, I don't know, like a contract on their accommodation and stuff like at least. These are things that obviously we kind of constantly apples to apples each other on the basis of. And I guess, do you think that that is the kind of metaphor that Extraordinary is trying to shine a light on, that you kind of live in a place like London, you feel lonely, you feel inadequate, you feel like everyone else has something that you don't, and that isolates you even further? is that the route it's going, or am I just taking a very analogous approach to it?
No, I think that's like bang on. Like it's the idea that, like, you know, that feeling exists in your 20s anyway, because you're constantly feeling like you're comparing yourself to everyone else, to people who have mortgages, long-term relationships. Everything seems easier. It's always grass, always green on the other side. It seems easier from your perspective. And I think then Emma's put this framework, the writer has put this framework on it, where it's like, oh, those superpowers, as you say, are like a metaphor. And then for Jen, who doesn't have one, it's like, oh, if I get one, I will be happy. And that's something we're constantly telling ourselves, right? It's like, oh, all I need is just to like buy a flat and then you'll be happy. It's like, no, you'll have mold, you'll have floorboards that'll fall through. Like, it's just, there's always going to be issues. Of course, having a mortgage.
In the process of trying to do that, so that's good. It's not happening, so that's good. I would give advice. I don't want to bad.
But it's a particularly scary feeling, I think, when you wake up in the morning, and more actually when you're going to bed at night, actually, and you start listing off all the people that have achieved this sense of achievement that you haven't achieved at the same time. And it instills a level of existential dread and anxiety that I think a lot of people listening to this podcast feel on a daily basis. But I think the moral of this story is that you can still achieve happiness throughout life without these goals being achieved. But I think what I wanted to kind of focus in on is, you know, the element of fear within that sentiment. And it's great that you guys have chosen fear as a team. Why did you choose fear?
I think like it's just so, I think it's an emotion that you feel so often, or I feel so often actually, I don't know. I feel it so often in so many different variations, and it's something that I'm familiar with, but sort of ashamed. Like I find like those emotions that you feel like they're bad emotions, like fear, shame, things like that. I find them quite interesting because they seem like there's a bit more sort of depth in some, or because you don't speak about them as much or with as many people, say, than maybe your close friends or whatever. It's less explored. And I think actually if we all spoke a bit more about what shame we have or what fear we're feeling, it would kind of normalise the emotion a bit more rather than it being just like, oh, it's this or whatever. You know what I mean? Kind of.
Yeah, totally. I think there is that like bravado to appear that everything's great, and we look at those people the same way as in the show. You look at people with certain superpowers and you go, oh, that person is just so admirable because everything seems like a breeze, to your point. But really, most probably in their head it's not that way. And so as you said, you're like, people are constantly feeling like they have to cover things up, and then to be the one to be honest about that. I do feel like in Seanchoíche, that's the beauty of it too, is where people that like get really overly nervous, everyone loves, because there's like a support behind it. And so it gives people a space to actually show their emotion like that, and show that like actually people are like relieved. They're like, fuck, are you nervous too? Like, I'm actually shaking. And so like that's where I think then you two coming on and speaking about this, like when I read it I was like, hold on, you two are actresses, like surely not, like of all people to be confident, that's like in your job, you know. But like it's so amazing and inspiring to see that no matter what you do, even if it's your job to like be on and perform, that you still have those emotions and feelings.
And it is like, I think it's so different, like you're able to hide behind such a mask when you're, you know, even the fact that we're reading each other's stories, I think is like, it can be a mask in that. But even having said that, I'm so nervous to read the story, like, and I'm really want to do it justice and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I feel when you're on stage or when you're in like TV and everything, it's like you're hiding behind a character, but you're not hiding, I guess, you're bringing yourself to it. But there's like a safety, I guess, there feels in that. And what struck me when I went to the Seanchoíche night was, like, they're these people, like, I would be terrified to stand up in front of a room of people and not only read a story, but just read a story as yourself, but also read a story that is extremely personal to you. And to see these people who, like, have never, some of them will never have stood up in front of a room and spoken, like, it's mind-blowing. And as you say, the honesty and the bravery, and when you witness that and people are kind of standing there, even in a terrified form or a nervous form, shaking, it makes you as an audience calm, because it's like, oh, I feel nervous for you, but we'll carry you through it.
And that's exactly what we say nowadays. Actually, it was feedback that someone gave me in New York, and I've taken that on, where like at the beginning of every Seanchoíche we let the audience know that one of the reasons that Seanchoíche differs from a stand-up comedy night or like a theatre performance or, you know, even a poetry slam is that at those events, it's often the speaker's responsibility exclusively to hold the audience in the palm of their hand. Traditionally, that's how it's perceived, at least. But at Seanchoíche, it's symbiotic. So it's also the audience's responsibility to hold the speaker in the palms of their hands as well. And that particularly comes into play when that speaker is, you know, nervous or looking for a little bit of interaction with their audience members. And it's really, it's like this unwritten code that exists in New York, in Cape Town, in Melbourne, in Dublin, in West Cork, in Italy. Like, that's just, you don't even have to tell people to do it. They're automatically doing it. But it's good to create like a certain element of like, you know, context that is the way Seanchoíche operates. And it's great that you identified that at the London event. And, you know, it is a really beautiful thing, I think, that's unique to Seanchoíche.
Yeah. I want to come back to your character quickly before we go into the stories, because your character is the one in the show, for everyone that hasn't watched it, that I suppose at like 18 everyone gets given a superpower, and your character doesn't get that superpower, right? So you're kind of the one that is the full, I'd say, like epitome of someone not feeling enough, right? Like literally not enough because you've not got this superpower.
Yeah.
As that is your character and people associate you with that, do you find there's a lot of people that come up to you, or you have conversations that are a bit more, where people are a bit more open or able to be like, oh, I really like, you know, felt like an affiliation with your character in that way, and you have those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always, yeah, it's lovely when people do speak to you. I'm sure you feel this as well, or we've spoken about it, so I know you do, but it's like, people just come up and speak to you as if they know you. And, you know, there's a difference, I guess, when you think of like, I don't know, Brian Cox in Succession. I don't particularly think anyone wants to go up to him and be like, oh my God, like, I appreciate that people feel like they're friends with their characters.
Yeah.
And that feels really rewarding, because then it's like they can relate to us, or they feel like they know us. And I think it's because there's a warm friendship group at the core of the show as well that helps. But yeah, and you get messages sometimes, like particularly with the grief storyline, that I find quite overwhelming sometimes, because it reminds you that, you know, you're not just playing that part and living in Jen's world. It's like, that's, you know, an experience that so many people have been through, and people who watching it will. I actually read recently, there was a woman who said that she had watched the first season with her dad when he was dying of cancer, and he passed away between the first season and the second season. And then when she was watching the second season, she like, it really touched her.
Wow.
Which, yeah, I remember when I read that, it like took me a second. Which, you know, I don't mean that in any righteous way that like, oh my God, but it's just like, it's a very simple storyline and a simple connection that people are forming with the show and with the characters. But I think it can have such a huge impact. Yeah, but it's lovely. I love when people come up and speak about it. Like, yeah.
To remind our listeners of the mechanic of today's show, as all of our shows, our guests have prepared a story each revolving around the same theme, and the theme of this episode being fear. We have asked these guests, the wonderful Máiréad and Fia, to come in today, and instead of reading their own stories, they're going to read each other's stories. So therefore, they're walking in each other's shoes, they're living through each other's experiences, reading each other's stories in the first person. It's a difficult thing to do. It's difficult to read your own story in front of a crowd, but it's even more difficult to read someone else's story. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. To start the storytelling element of our podcast, we have Máiréad Tyers reading Sofia Oxenham's story, All About Fear.
I was listening to a podcast recently where they said that anxiety is just unfocused fear. As someone who experiences anxiety, I can relate to the similarities in that feeling. But essentially for me, there is a difference. Fear makes me freeze. It makes me unable to move. And as my body slows down, my imagination and mind speed up. The anticipation of danger, picturing all the worst things that are definitely about to happen. Everyone is born with two innate fears: fear of falling and loud sounds. The rest are learned. Our surroundings, parents, siblings, friends, TV, teach us at a young age to be scared of things, like the dark, monsters or zombies. Experience shapes our fear as we get older. While there are certain things that trigger fear in most of us, we can learn to become afraid of nearly anything. I am someone who is afraid of a lot. I'm the woman who truthfully would rather sleep with a nightlight. I still scream when I see spiders and just don't get roller coasters as a source of fun. But recently, I met someone who changed my perspective on fear and helped me calm down. She didn't tell me to calm down because we all know no one has ever calmed down by being told to calm down. But when I feel my hands go sweaty, my heart quicken, my breath shorten, and the impending doom that this really is the end, I think of her and instantly relax. One Saturday last October, I had spent most of the previous night awake, convinced that a burglar was trying to break in. Turns out it was just a creaky boiler, but after thinking of every possible way to come out of the scenario alive, I called my friend Lucy and explained that my imagination was so active I was often paralysed in fear. It is the feeling of fear that alters my body and tells me that I need to get out or run, that something isn't right. And while sometimes I am right, more times than most I am wrong. And the feeling has convinced me of something that isn't actually there. Lucy picked me up and told me she wanted me to meet someone. She'd been working on an article called The Woman with No Fear and had become friends with a woman who she thought it was important for me to meet. She took me to a house down a windy road in the valley, nestled in trees. Lucy commented that it looked like somewhere a Sylvanian family would live. I nodded and thought the remoteness made it feel more like it was the set of a horror film. A young woman named Susie opened the door. She had wild red hair, was in her 50s and was wearing shorts in October. Susie invited us in and asked if we would like coffee, vodka or nettle tea. I went for coffee as it was 10 a.m, but liked how she had given us the option, not being influenced by societal timings on when it was appropriate to have vodka. Susie was American. She was very friendly, outgoing and playful. There was no social awkwardness and it felt like an unusual first meeting. She stood extremely close to me and held prolonged eye contact. She struck me as someone who was living fully and viscerally. She was incredibly open and quickly begun to tell me her story. When she was a child, she had been diagnosed with a disease, Rebekah, which had given her a rare form of brain damage that physiologically reduces her ability to feel fear. She had been the subject to many tests over the years. Handling snakes and tarantulas, no fear detected. Walking through a haunted house, no fear detected. Locked in a dark room, no fear detected. She told me that watching fear-inducing clips from horror films only induced emotions like interest, curiosity and excitement. I watched her and marvelled how her ability to be fearless made her live so fully, while mine held me back. Susie was not immune to all fear, but only a select few things would make her feel it. She told me how, even though she has not spent much time feeling scared, her life had not been easy. Susie has been the victim of traumatic and life-threatening incidents. She's been held up at knife point and experienced bad domestic abuse throughout her life. Despite the life-threatening nature of many of these situations, Susie did not exhibit any signs of desperation, urgency, or other behavioural responses that would normally accompany such incidents. She told me each of these stories with enthusiasm and excitement. And as the morning went on, I learned that she was positive about most people, situations, and issues. She didn't want the past to define her and couldn't get over the miracle of being alive and how many things there were to see, do, and feel. She radiated light, adventure, and individuality, and had a childlike quality, sense of wonder. The more time I spent with her, the more I felt myself start to open up. Rather than seeing everything as a threat, see it as an experience or something to grow from, to push myself through the fear. That perhaps if I pushed myself through it, I would learn something from it. I felt Susie's energy rubbing off on me. After a morning chatting and getting to know each other, we took a long walk and go to a river. Susie assured me that this was her favourite swimming spot and began to strip down and run towards a swinging tire. She beckoned me to join, but I hesitated. Felt the familiar feelings mounting up inside of me. Susie smiled at me and said, "What's the worst that can happen?" I laughed and thought how much this comment defined such opposing views on fear. To Susie, it was an adrenaline rush, a fun memory, to jump into this river in October with this woman she had just met. For me, I was already fretting, looking at the inky water. How deep was it? Was it fast flowing? Was there eels? And how could Susie not think the tire would combust mid-air? But I looked at Susie standing there. She'd been through so much good and so much bad. And as her smile got bigger, I trusted her. If she was the way she was now, after all she's been through, maybe I would be okay. Susie yelled to me. Courage is not a feeling. Courage is a decision not to be controlled by the feelings of fear. Susie's energy was inspiring to me. Her lack of fear was giving me the courage to push through and make a different choice. So as an orchestra played motivational music, the imaginary crowd applauding me on, as I took my clothes off and ran towards the swing, this was it. This was the moment. The moment I conquered my fear. But before I could take the plunge of glory, Susie had sneaked behind me and pushed me in.
Great, that was so well read.
My God.
Gorgeously written for
I
you.
know, beautiful.
So beautifully written. Beautifully
right.
written and beautifully read. A nice collaborative approach to this.
God, that's so interesting hearing something you've read by someone else.
And I loved reading
It's
it.
so-
Like, I'm hearing it in your that's your voice. Like I'm hearing it in your voice as I'm
But
reading it
it's
as well.
so weird, like all the kind of like little complexities you added to it. It was so great. Wow,
It's beautifully written for you.
I
Gorgeous
feel like a
story.
writer.
Well, I think you might be.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
What did it feel? What did it feel like for you reading that? Kind of on a personal
It's-
level with Fee.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that it's something we speak about. I feel like kind of fear and anxiety, and I think it's such a gorgeous story, and I think I don't know. There's something like when it gets to the end, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? Such a simple thing to say for one person, yet means like so much for another person. And I don't, yeah, that sentence about courage, I feel like that's something you said to me before. Like you Fia always has such like brilliant like one-liners in terms of humor because she's fucking hilarious, but also like one-liners about like life and fear and a number of different things, and that courage, the one about courage, is like. That really struck me when I first read it, you know, a couple of days ago when she first sent it in. But I feel like every time I read it, I'm like, it takes me a moment to kind of really grasp what it actually means.
Yeah.
What is it again? It's courage is
It's a decision, right?
it's a decision.
Courage is the decision. Courage is the decision not to be controlled by feelings of fear. Yeah, it's definitely true. It's something It resonated with me a lot reading this because, like, I was such a scared kid.
Were
I was really
you?
meek. Yeah. My dad is quite cautious and a little bit overprotective of his 5 children when we were growing up. So, like, you know, climbing trees or climbing rocks or a trampoline were an absolute no-no. And yeah, I just remember as a kid, my friends being quite frustrated with how cautious I would be when exploring, or I'd be clinging onto railings and stuff. I'm just like very, very much afraid. And I think there was some chip that was clicked in me when I was a teenager to try and take the decision to not be controlled by that fear. Probably through meeting people not dissimilar to Susie. And I think that for the fearful, you conquer fear yourself and you don't let yourself be controlled by fear, but it often are these little human catalysts who show you how enriching life can be when you don't feel it or you don't let yourself be controlled by it.
Totally.
And that was really beautifully put together by this specific experience and the narrative about it.
I think also, especially when you're like teenager or little or the kind of like preteen, you're really influenced often by what your peers are doing. And so if I don't know if you guys, I always remember like I had a friend, like the brave friend,
Same.
and she would always be like, come on, we can do this, we can do this. They kind of instill that energy. And Máiréad, I feel like you're really like that now in terms of our relationship. You're like, no, it's fine, we can do this, we got this. And I think sometimes that encouragement, it just pushes you a bit more out of your comfort zone, and maybe you just need, you want to be like, if I'm doing it with my friend or if I'm doing it, then it makes it okay in a way. But it's harder to find that sometimes in yourself, I guess.
Well, that is what I picked up on in the first part of your story, is that a lot of it's very much when you're on your own. It's
Yeah.
like, like the burglar thing. Although mine's is more when I'm more like, oh, is that a ghost than a burglar? I think that's Irish upbringing. Probably gets us there.
Yeah, a bit of ghosts,
Really?
but burglars mainly.
I think
Yeah.
the burglars as
Oh,
well.
really?
Yeah. Well, it's funny 'cause when you sent that, because at the moment, this doesn't go out for a few weeks, so it's okay. Anyone knows where I live. I'm by myself at the moment. My housemates are away for like 3 weeks, and like, quite luckily, unluckily, my boyfriend's housemate's ceiling has fallen in, so he's come to stay.
Oh, great, okay.
But I had one night where I was by myself in the house, and I hated it. And when I read this, I was like, it was the morning after, and I was like, oh, like that's. I'm like, what is it that we're so fearful of? And I'm like, maybe that goes away over time if you live by yourself. Like, yet or maybe it's more of as a woman, there's more things to be scared of. Like,
definitely.
But also we're fascinated by, like, you know, my friend told me this story recently about burglar, and like I knew that this was damaging. I knew this was not going to be good for, but I was like, tell me more. I was getting off on it.
It's
So
a
I was
fascination with the fear, but
yeah.
yeah.
my granduncle got burgled, and this is a story I often tell at Seanchoíche, and I make it really quick because I know that we haven't had a chance to have the other story yet. But my granduncle, when he was broken into when he was 96 years old, he lived until he was 100. He never retired, and he was a lawyer.
Wow.
And he woke up to hearing movement in the hallway, and he could tell that someone had intruded, and the door creaked open, and in walked this man that my granduncle had never met before. And this is obviously the moment where you would like throw something or call the police or protect your wife that's in the bed next to you, but instead my granduncle just said hello to him. And he asked him what he needed, and the burglar said that he wanted money, and Mara's like you're going to wake my wife, go into the study and to the living room, and I'll be with you in 5 minutes, and we can talk about that a little bit more. And they ended up having like a 2-hour long chat. They chatted and chatted and chatted and talked about everything there is to talk about, and at the very end of the early hours of the morning, Morris said that he was going to go back to bed, and he asked the burglar to please go out through the front door rather than through the window that he'd come through, and that if he wanted money, there was a €20 note on his desk in the study that he could take, but the rest of the money was in the bank. And Morris is like, I don't think my wife would be too happy with you being here in the morning, with all due respect. So Morris went into bed, and as he was in bed, he could hear a lot of rustling around the study, where there was like his phone, his checkbook, his laptop. Naturally, those things would all be fleeced. And it only dawned on him that would happen when he was in bed again. But when he woke up the next morning, the door was locked, the window that he'd come through was closed. And when he went into the study, the only thing that had been taken was the €20 note. Nothing else had been stolen. And they say there was a sticky note that said thank you on his desk as well for listening. It just goes to show that he completely disarmed this man.
Yeah.
I suppose facing fear with a level of kindness and empathy, and treating someone who was the instiller of that fear with a level of dignity that he probably never really felt before. I'm not telling you to try this at home if you get burgled. It doesn't always end up that way, but in the case of my granduncle it did, and it's a story that I think I always like to tell.
God, that's
in the
incredible.
context, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in that scenario just to see what exactly went down.
But also that he trusted him, to be like, I'm going to go back to bed, go, and if you want to take the €20, go into the study. Like, do you know what I mean? That he wasn't like, okay, right, now it's time to go. Do you know what I mean?
Watched him as he
gave him respect.
Yeah, completely, exactly. It was probably respect that man has not been treated with in a number of years, and agency as well.
Yeah.
Like Marius is like, look, rummage around my house, get what you need, but please make sure you lock the door when you walk out.
It's fascinating, like as well, the disarming of someone who's trying to instill fear, who's trying to, like, be that through intimidation or through confrontation or whatever it might be, like the moment where that's a fearless act, I guess, right, to like choose to disarm them in whatever way that might be. That's quite brave of Morris.
Yeah, he was a brave man.
I wanted to come back to your feeling of fear in general. I think it's so beautifully put, the way you say you come towards this house and the way that you interpret it versus how your friend interprets it. You know, you see it as like the scary haunted house, where to her it's like kind of idyllic.
It's weird hearing Marie read it then. I was like, a lot of like the descriptions almost sound quite childlike of fear.
Slovenian family.
Yeah, like, and also it's quite like the things you're scared of when you're really young, like zombies and like a haunted house. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was quite kind of, it felt very kind of almost fairy tale like, a lot of the kind of fears. Sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
No, but that's also it. It's this sort of like, when you think of fear, it almost is otherworldly in the way that it takes over you. It sort of has to be that to almost be okay in your own way, you know what I mean? Like, and also a lot of it is instilled as a kid, to your point, and so there's something you can't get away from in that, no matter when you grow up. Like, it's irrational, but that is fear sometimes is irrational.
Totally.
But I love the way you describe that, because for me it's so true that everyone just feels things so differently. Like your friend in that case, I mean, obviously she's studying, this woman, so she has a fascination with fear to some degree, but then the extremity of this woman Susie, who fears no fear mostly at all, and you as someone that just feels it so much, like coming together and still bonding. And I liked how you said there that even with like a burglar, you want to hear it even though you know you don't, because you must get a kick out of the adrenaline some way or the other, which Susie, like, whether or not, like, she's talking about being held at knife point with excitement and like still going
Interest
to
and
do
intrigue.
these things, like running that attire into the water, like she's still seeking this adrenaline hit one way or the other. So like whatever way you feel it, the two of you have a bond in wanting to feel that emotion one way or the other.
I think that's so true. And also, like, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because sure, fear is not the most comforting feeling, but I think it also means, like, it shows you've got quite an active imagination. There's like positive parts to it too. And as you say, you're getting that kind of like adrenaline kick.
Yeah.
For me, I think I prefer that to sort of feeling numb and sort of steady. So I guess it's kind of just a bit, maybe a bit of a choice as well.
Where is Susie now? Or are you still in touch
She
with her?
is living in, yes, I don't speak to her very much at all anymore. No, sadly. But I should. This story has
I'd
made me
love
feel
her to
like
come on this podcast or something. Yeah.
Such an image of what she's like.
Same, actually. Yeah, she seems...
I love the shorts thing. Honestly, when I read that, I laughed out loud, because I was like, there is a certain type of person.
Gay men.
Because I'm afraid of the cold.
Literally gay men. I wear shorts through the year. I'm rarely wearing...
The gays and the people that feel no fear.
You just not feel your legs getting cold.
No, legs don't get cold, innit?
Oh, come here.
Will you wear like a jumper and a coat and then shorts?
I'll wear like literally a fucking like Sherpa from the waist up, but then the waist down is the O'Neills or
But
the
is it
Nikes.
Is it not to show off your calves?
Yeah, of course it is. That's exactly what it's for.
All
But,
year round.
I
yeah.
like it. I like that. I'm going to start this.
yeah, honestly, all the gays, like that's how you spot a gay in the winter. You don't need grinder. You just need to see a man in shorts. I'm sorry, that's literally science at this point. Yeah, but it's funny because I remember one time. Oh, where was it? It actually might have been with a mutual friend of ours, but I was going to wear pants for the evening, and then he was like, "No, sure, legs don't get cold. Wear shorts." And I was like, "That's such a good point. Legs don't get cold."
That is such
such
man
a
logic.
lie.
Like, I'm sorry.
I know.
Let's definitely get cold.
But can I say, I think they don't get cold from the knee, like just above the knee down. But if you're wearing like denim hot pants,
Oh yeah, but
this
then
area gets cold.
yeah, the thigh does
The thigh.
get cold. I think the
Right.
the thigh is the central conductor of all body temperature. Let's look that up after this podcast.
Let's say Susie as a woman wearing shorts, to me, women that wear shorts like that through the year, to me, I'm like, there's something special about you.
Yeah.
Like, honest, like they've got like a sort of, you know, like kind of just sort of like running with life, like no issue, like vibe to them that I am like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I put it, I can't remember if but she also had like big, red, wild, curly hair.
That's
Do you know what I
cool.
mean? She was just sort of like, she's
Part
out
of nature.
there. Yeah.
She's nature. She's in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool that you met her, and so cool that your friend identified that this is the right person for you to meet. Like
Yeah,
sometimes it is just an introduction like that you need to experience to view life in a different perspective, I think.
Exactly. And it really made me think after meeting her, I was like, I don't want to be like on my deathbed and thinking, I was just scared the whole time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
And actually, hopefully, if you do push yourself, like, you will be okay. It's just the feeling that talks you out of it. And actually, like, you know, not all the time, but sometimes you should push yourself past things that you actually feel comfortable with. It will be all right. You'll learn something from it. And if it's terrible, you'll still recover, hopefully, you know?
Well, I remember someone saying to me, because I get like seriously nervous and anxious, that the feeling is actually, if you think about it, we just wrap it as a negative thing. It's not necessarily negative, but the way we're brought up and stuff, it's like a sign that you're unsafe. But really, it's excitement. So, like before you go on stage or before you go to say something out loud, where like you get that overwhelming feeling, if you just try and say it's excitement and you push through it that way, that actually like then you start to enjoy it a bit more, and that's where people get addicted to like running after that feeling in some way. So I always thought that was nice, of like trying to like not just associate it with something terrible from the upfront.
I also really liked your point about how like everyone is so different. You know, I think about those people who do skydiving trips, you know, like you take the people on their backs.
Yeah.
That's not the technical term, but you know what I mean. And I'm like, that's like 10 a day.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
But for them, that's just totally normal.
Work, like.
It's crazy.
I find I'm the same with people who work in airplanes. Like, I'm not the best flyer, and I'll just see the flight attendant like literally standing on their 2 feet when the turbulence is jarring.
But let's say like stunt people as well, like stunt people on sets, like there's a high risk every time that they do it, and it's a thing of like the more times they do it, the more risk increases, right? So and they get paid more the more times that they like do it. Yeah, which is why there kind of has to be quite a strict limit on how many times they're doing it, because sort of if they're not getting overexcited and going, oh, I'll get more money if I do it again, I'll do it again. They try and do it the least amount of times possible to like reduce the risk. But like something like that, it's like, because I get a lot of fear about like breaking bones and like physical like damage and stuff, probably because of past injuries I've had and stuff, that like I can't watch videos, can't hear about injuries, all that kind of stuff. That's a real like, so to think of someone who possesses none of those fears, or maybe they do but they're able to push through it for their job and do it every day, is like,
it's mind-blowing.
That must be that, and that's probably, it's like if you jump in water once, it's scary, but if you do it 10 times, it's like anything, it gets easier. Like, I thought, wow, you reading that was incredible, and I thought, you've done that before. Like, a lot of people, and like, still myself, and when they're reading something like that, are like,
it's pretty
but like, it's clearly your profession now, like you're comfortable with it, but but that's not something that's like everyone's comfortable with, so it's just cleally taking practice and experience.
More time to do it,
And differences, like the stuntman who can probably like run into a burning pit, something like that, would probably be like nervous to do like a scene.
Completely.
Yes,
Exactly.
I know, bang on.
Yeah.
But we actually often find that. So at All Together now, the music festival in Ireland, in Waterford, we run the storytelling tent at this festival, and one of the slots is Seanchoíche and music, where we get musicians to get up and tell their stories, and then they do a little musical number afterwards, and they're just like, I don't do this. Like, I do all of my storytelling through the comfort and blanket of song, and now that I actually have to tell a story that's personal, it's terrifying. And but like concert performers in music, they do need to back themselves orally as well as musically, because generally in between songs they communicate with the audience and stuff like that. But most musicians I've spoken to really struggle with the speaking part, because it's something they can avoid through music. And I guess similarly, when we've had actors speak at Seanchoíche as well, they find it quite scary not playing a role. Like, they find it scary telling their own story.
I found that really weird, hearing Máiréad read something so brilliantly, but read something that I'd written. I found that really exposing, which is really weird, because normally you're used to just doing other people's words. Do you know what I mean? So it felt like a nerve-wracking thing.
Yeah, I'm like the other way around. I did an improv course.
In London.
No, in Amsterdam. I'd kind of just came out of a breakup, and you do like wild things that you would never do. I don't know where my head was at, but anyways, did this, and I thought it was so psychological, because I'm like not okay, but like I know who I am in a way, and I can sit here and like have a conversation, because I'm like, I'm just helping people like speak to each other in a way. But when I had to get up and like somehow take on a role, I just couldn't do it. Like, I completely froze.
Really?
Yeah, I like couldn't. I was too like, especially in improv, too trying to make sure the other person was comfortable. So I didn't want to react in a way that would make them uncomfortable, which sometimes was my role. So I kind of just kept like quite like
rigid,
nonchalant.
But it was like you didn't have a script. It was like improv entirely.
Yeah.
Because that, like, I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, the fearlessness I see in you when we're on set and you do improv is phenomenal. Like, Fia is completely fearless. I'd love to know what you I'd love to know what you feel in those moments, because it's like, because improv, similar to what you're describing there, I get terrified. I'm like, I need to say something funny, I need to make people laugh, I need to say something that makes sense. What if I get an idea in my head, and then as soon as I say it, the words won't make sense when they come out of my mouth, making someone else feel comfortable, all that stuff. Like, you just come out with such fucking brilliant, like, one-liners, everything, and like, but I would love to, like, how does it feel?
That's such a nice thing
I know
to say.
you've done courses and stuff as well, like in
That's
improv.
so nice, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to know, let's say, in this discussion about fear, do you feel that fear?
No.
And do you just go,
Not for that.
you don't? Yeah.
Because I feel safe in the structure of what it, even though there is no structure in improv, I feel I feel safe in the rules that I've created in my head of the rules of improv. And I feel like, because you have the 2 minutes, and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen in these 2 minutes between us. Yeah. There's something about that gives me like an adrenaline rush. But I feel, I think what freaks me out is like, not knowing the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm
I'm
explaining.
the exact same.
Do you know what I mean? So, like, for example, I feel all right. I don't know if you have that, Gaff, where I'd be like, okay, I feel all right if we're doing something like this because we know the structure of how this is going to work. But say if you're like, okay, let's go, we're going to go to a party tonight. You're going to meet all my friends. You're not going to know anyone. I'd be like, that would freak me out way more because I'm like, but what's the structure? How's it going to look like? It's kind of weird. Are you the same as that?
Well, I'm sorry, I was thinking a bit differently. Well, for me, like when I, in my very short acting career, when I was 7 years old and I was in the school play, I loved improv so much because of the open blank page, like the idea of not having a formula or structure to follow. And then when I was doing scripted stuff, I would find that really stressful because there's rules, there's things to follow, there's like, you know, you have to be word for word correct. And when I translate that into kind of like my career, when I was working in marketing before I started this, presenting data and presenting like PowerPoint presentations or like, you know, reports, I found that so stressful because once again I had to follow structure, I had to follow a rule, I had to follow a rule book. Whereas like telling a personal story in front of an audience, piece of cake. Because it's just, I can say whatever I want and I can still get it into a structure of my own right. And I think that's why in improv, I actually would love to do the improv course again just to see how I get on, because I did love the improv section of acting when I did it as a kid. But in the same way, like, I think I like the safety of it being strictly an improv situation. It's the same with how I learn languages. Like, I don't really learn languages from textbooks. I learn it from just faking it till I make it. And like putting on an accent and then hoping for the best.
It was funny, some of the people that were really great at improv after struggled more to have that social setting that was a bit more free reign. So I was like, you see where people are comfortable and how we all interpret things differently in our head, but assume everyone else is like feeling the same feeling. And so I think it's lovely that you just called out what you admire about each other in a way, because we should probably do that more, because we all just take it for granted, you know. We assume
100%.
like that's not impressive at all, that's just normal.
That's so true.
So now we're going to have Sophia read Máiréad's story about fear.
When we decided on this theme, a story came to mind immediately. I'm reminded of it quite often, and I'm still left wondering what exactly I was so fearful of. I moved here 7 years ago, and I was terrified of everything about London. I just wanted to blend in and do everything right by London standards, so as to not get chewed up and spat out. I barely said hello to shop assistants, said a meek thank you to the bus drivers, avoided eye contact, and spoke in whispers on the tube. Because that's what everyone else did. It struck me how everyone seemed fearful of interacting with one another, scared to develop a relationship with a stranger beyond a transactional one. And I was doing it now too. I lived in Willesden Green for my first year, with other students from my drama school. It didn't always feel like the safest place to be as a young woman, but there was still a sense of community. We would call into Big Bite Fish and Chip Shop next to the station when we couldn't face throwing a dinner together after a long day of doing spinal rolls. We did that so often that the man behind the counter started to get to know us, and we would chat. Sometimes my housemates wouldn't have enough in cash to pay for his chips, and Big Bite Man was happy to him to pay the balance next time. He was kind and friendly, and during a time when I was homesick and lonely, it was welcome. Our flat was on the 3rd floor of what would have once been a huge fuck-off house. And I think there were 5 other flats in the building altogether. We all shared a front gate, a front door, a communal garden in the back, and a bin shed. Never once in the year that I lived there did I see another neighbour. The only interaction I had was with the guy who lived directly below us, was when we had a house party and he asked us to turn the music off at 4 a.m. Completely fair enough. It felt bizarre to be sharing the building with approximately 15 other people, all of us sleeping under the same roof every night, and to never have the chance to even say a hello to any of them. Even with our friend at Big Bite, London felt lonely. A few years later, I moved to another area in North London. I lucked out by managing to secure a room in a house full of people I had lived with previously, in a beautiful, leafy area with a sitting room and a garden. When I moved in, they'd been living in the house for a year already, so knew the area well. as well as the neighbours. One of my housemates used to go for walks during lockdown with one of our neighbours on the left-hand side, a Scottish woman who was quick-witted and uber-intelligent. They would bake for each other and swap recipes. Once, I tried to get in on the baking fun and made her a bacon and caramelised onion tart, only to find out when I called in to deliver it, she was Jewish.
So no pork?
Mortified, yeah. Mortified.
Ireland.
Our neighbours on the right-hand side were a family with 3 kids who loved having barbecues and peered over the fence if they saw us smoking outside, looking for a chat and a lend of a rollie. One of my housemates used to babysit the kids when the parents were out, and sometimes they gave us lifts down the road to the big Tesco. There was a WhatsApp group for our road with messages about strange men looking in windows, or missing cats, or what planning permission they weren't so keen on that month, etc. It was gorgeous, and was exactly the sense of community I'd been craving previously. About a year later, it was an extremely hot summer day, and I was on my way to Ali Pali to meet a friend of mine I hadn't seen for a while. I was running behind, desperately texting apologies for my lateness. I planned on taking the bus, but as I walked up to the bus stop, I could see a woman laying on the ground about 50 metres ahead. I carried on walking to see what was going on, as another man, who I recognised as one of the workers from the shop across the road, did the same. She was face down on the concrete and had a shopping bag with her, as well as a tiny sausage dog on a lead with a red collar around its neck. The dog seemed calm and didn't yap or bark as we both came closer. The man from the shop started speaking to her, asking her if she was all right. As she began to sit up, I could see her more clearly. She was early 50s, with a short brown bob in a blue summer dress. I could also see a small pool of blood on the ground. Her head was cut, and she seemed disorientated and confused, not saying much. We helped her over to sit on the small step outside the betting shop. I sat next to her and tried to speak to her. She looked blankly at me. The man explained that he knew her from coming into the corner shop, and he also knew that she had epilepsy. He deduced that she had probably fallen to the ground during an epileptic fit and hit her head on the concrete, causing it to bleed. He went to get tissues for the blood while I called an ambulance. I explained what we thought had happened, and they said it would be a little while before the paramedics could come. I told them where we were and that we would wait. As I was on the phone, I could see the woman coming back to herself. She started asking who we were and what had happened, and was growing in panic as we explained about the ambulance and her head bleeding. "I'm fine," she said. "I need to go home and get the dog out of the sun." She was irritated and seemed annoyed at our reaction to her fall. I tried to explain to her that she'd hit her head quite badly and that it would be best to be seen by a paramedic. "How long will they be?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "They said it might take quite a while." "No, look, I'm fine. I'm not even bleeding anymore." She was right, but I was still concerned for her. She had a blank stare in her eyes only a few minutes prior. I didn't trust that she was completely fine now. "I need to get the dog out of the sun. It's too hot," she insisted. I was hesitant to suggest it, but I said, "I really think it would be best to get the cut on your head checked. The ambulance are on their way anyway. I live just around the corner. How about I come and sit with you until they come?" "Yes, okay, fine, if you want." It didn't really seem like that's what she wanted, but it felt dangerous to leave her on her own after what had just happened. I explained our plan to the shop worker, and we began to walk her to her house in awkward silence. She lived just a few doors up from me, so I immediately tried to connect over this fact, and it felt like it worked. She was beginning to warm up. As we went into her house, she asked me to explain to her what had happened. She'd had no memory of it whatsoever, and she said that she'd had these fits. She often doesn't remember the moments before. She also said she often gets irate after they happen and apologises for how she may have spoken to me. To be fair, if I'd fallen on my head, and I couldn't remember a thing about it, and had 2 randomers making a right fuss about me, I'd be irate too. I called the ambulance to tell them to come to the address instead of the street on which she fell, and they said they were on their way and that it wouldn't be long. It took another hour for them to call, which of course is less than ideal, but it means that Alice and I got to know each other. We got on exceptionally well. She told me about her daughter, who was my age. She asked about my work and how I came to live in the area. We made a lot of connections. It turned out her grandmother went to the same drama school that I did, and we were able to search her name on the alumni records, and she told me stories about her. We effortlessly chatted back and forth. The paramedics came and treated the cut on her head, and once they'd gone, it was now my turn to go. I took her email address and left her mine. She asked if I would write her down the series of events to show her neurologist, and wanted to send me pictures of the newly restored Alexandra Palace Theatre, where she volunteered as an usher. It was a beautiful and special afternoon that came out of something terrible, and it felt wonderful to have made this unique connection with someone only a few doors up from me. And while I never made it to Ali Pali to meet my friend, it was okay, because perhaps I made a new one in my neighbourhood. Alice. I emailed Alice the next day with my account of her fall. She sent me an email back thanking me and apologising for not offering me a drink when I was in her home. She'd been into the corner shop to thank the man for the help and would send me on the photos of the restored theatre when she found them. And she asked if I'd like to go for a walk sometime. I never responded to that email. It's been 2 years, and I've seen Alice maybe 4 times on the street since then. And we've never said hello. I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't recognise me because of the confusion of that day. But I recognise her. I think of her every time I walk past her house. When I got her email response, I filled with fear. It's happened before when I've had a beautiful experience with someone, and once there's an option for it to continue, I choose inaction. It's a fear of something, a fear that they may rely on me because I did a kind thing for them, or a fear that they think I'm a good person and I'll not live up to their expectations. Or maybe I just want the experience to be left as it was and not spoiled. What if it turns out we don't have anything else to speak about, or Alice wants me to meet up with her every day from now on? It's a similar fear to what I felt when I first moved over. I don't know this person and their intentions. But the fact was, I did know Alice, albeit not very well, but even so, would it not be better to give it the benefit of the doubt? To cast my fear aside and open myself up to the opportunity of making a friend out of a neighbour? What's the worst that can happen? I think next time I see Alice, I'll say hello.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Such a beautiful story.
Oh, it's such a fucking gorgeous story. It's really bloody moving, actually, to be honest. Like that neighbourhood acquaintance that you wouldn't have really fostered if you hadn't just been there at the right fleeting time. And that kind of sacred nature of those encounters as well. Like that you don't really want to actively seek another one in case it isn't as weirdly perfect as that one.
No, I know.
And I found it really interesting the way, like, the synergy between both of your stories in the context of fear. One of the olive branch themes that actually underpins both of your stories is an encounter with a stranger.
Yes,
And
yeah.
how growing up we're conditioned to fear strangers.
Yeah.
And
Particularly in London as well, I feel it's so,
Big time.
strangers just don't want to interact. It's transactional, and someone starts talking on the tube, it's weird.
I really like that about your story. Like, I felt like I really could feel the loneliness that you felt coming from home to experience Ireland when you were only 18. Yeah, you must mention that. But you were so young, and it must have been so alien and so strange. And then this older woman, to kind of meet her, have this incredible experience. I wondered if my question to you is, do you think she does remember? I wondered if she did remember and felt shame about, not about the experience. Obviously she would have, I imagine from what you've said, like it was beautiful, but wondered if she felt shame about having the epileptic fit on the street, and that's maybe why she hadn't come up to you. I don't know.
I don't think so, because I think, like, even as far as she was, like, I don't think she felt like, you know, the memory of having that hour where we sat together in her house, like, she didn't remember any of it. So I don't think it's like, it's not as if you were there and then you were like, oh, I'm embarrassed because I couldn't remember what happened. It's like she wasn't even there.
Oh, okay.
Like, she had no memory of it at all. And didn't, you know, she said that often she got like, she would feel things in the morning beforehand, like she might feel faint if like she feels a fit coming on later in the day. And she said, I hadn't really felt that today, so I'm surprised that it happened. But I genuinely think she wouldn't recognise me, because even it was 2 years ago as well. Like, if you meet someone once, and especially if you've had like an epileptic fit like that, and you know, you don't, a head trauma as well, it's like, how could you? But I mean, I've always wondered, like, I feel quite fascinated as to why I didn't respond. And I remember when I got the email, kind of subconsciously making the decision that I wasn't going to respond. And like, it was in my head for months, and anytime I walk past her house, it's like, I've not responded to her email.
Yeah, I thought that was incredible. Like, that really hit me when I read it, because I didn't expect it. But it was so honest. Like,
So honest.
I think, you know, there's these moments that we have, whether she must remember something to have sent you an email, so that's one part of it. But you know, she didn't get a response, or you chose not to respond. And there is always that, like, when that happens in a situation between people, there's that what if, or maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe this woman feels shame, maybe they feel this, maybe I, you know, like even yourself, maybe I feel this is why I'm not responding. Like, the overthinking becomes this like bigger anxiety, which is fear in itself, because it's fear of not knowing really what the answer is.
Yes,
And like, but you just know that you feel unable to do it, or that you don't want to. Like, maybe, as you said, there's a fear that you're not enough, you know what I mean? Like, you've had this moment with this woman that you've helped her and had this connection, but like, maybe if you just get to know each other normally, then maybe you won't really like each other, and that means her not liking you, which is like,
and then it almost spoils the experience of what happened. And I think that the reliance is a big thing in my head. I don't know why. It's like the fact that like she was vulnerable and I helped her in that moment, which, you know, I was proud of myself for having done that, but also it's like, oh, but that's all I'll do, actually. It's kind of like a detachment almost, that is saying, oh, I don't want you to think that I'll always be there for you, because I don't know if I can offer that to you. And it's and as I said, it's happened before where, you know, getting contact from people, and but I will say, since this happened 2 years ago, I've made two friends who I met. One of them was my friend Jess, who both of us were sitting on the bus stop, and it was so sweet. There was two kids shouting across the road at each other, and I think they were like, they were about to go back after half term. They were like, what subject do you have on Monday? Like, shouting across the road, like, maths! And me and Jess were both laughing, and then we kind of said, oh, isn't that adorable? And then she was Irish, and we started chatting, and now she lives around the corner. We stayed really firm friends. And again, it's one of those classic ones. You make all these connections. She's an actor as well. Swap each other's numbers, and it's like, oh, we should go for a drink. We didn't go for a drink for about a year, and then bumped into her again at the bus stop. And then I was like, we should really do that drink. It's like, you say, you do these things happen like that where... And I think from now on, I've wanted to like commit to like what is so frightening, and what if I was to have sent her an email back, and we were to have met up, or I was to go round for her house for a cup of tea, or we went for a walk, and let's say we didn't get on, or we didn't have that much to talk about, so be it. We could have gone for a walk, and then you know, maybe it just could have petered out. But like, I think of, let's say, what am I so scared of? You know, the reliance, again, like, you can set those boundaries. Like, whatever, I now feel, having learned from that situation, that whatever I am so fearful of, if it would have come up, I think I would be able to deal with it.
And control it.
Yeah, and control it, which I guess is, you know, it's...
Well, like you've done this whole story about her, which is facing that fear or acknowledging it in a way. And I definitely think there's a massive fear we all have in other people's expectations of us.
Completely.
Yeah.
Like, that's, you know...
Yeah, I think it's different because she was in a vulnerable position when you met, but we've all had that encounter at the bus stop with someone who went to the same school as us, or lived in the same country as us, or whatever, and you know, we got each of these numbers, and then we just went back into our own comfort zones. And you know, I think this is something that I often encourage, like, definitely try and foster a connection with a stranger.
Yes, yeah.
And don't fear it, but at the same time, be content with the fact that they might remain a stranger, and each of us are in our own swimming lanes, and we're all living our own lives, and that's challenging enough as it is. It's very hard to jump into someone else's. And I think that there's this pressure to reply, there's this pressure to give, there's this pressure to be reciprocal in every single interaction that we have. And
especially when we're so contactable nowadays as well.
yeah. And there's a fear to not being that too, as much as there's a fear to offering too much. And, you know, it's a matter of, once again, not being controlled by that and understanding what's right for you in that moment in time.
Yeah.
Which I think your story really honestly reflects on. I think there'll be a lot of people that listen to this and are like, oh my God, I owe my neighbour down the road a response as well.
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
Or like maybe even 2 years on, like maybe 2 years on now you're like, I'm ready to say hi. Maybe
Completely.
you weren't
I
2
really
years
do,
ago, but now you're like, oh.
Well, that's what I think about when I first moved to London, again, as I described in the story. Like, I was so fearful of just everything and any interaction. It's like, why are you going to kill me?
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like, there's such a, you know, when you're kind of big city and you're not used to all this like stimulus and everything, it's just so overwhelming. And now I think I feel much more grounded in that, and I feel like London is my home, that if someone was to chat on the bus or anything like that, I feel kind of open to.
Yeah, you have space for it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like, I'm almost interested. It's like,
Yeah.
but again, maybe that comes from having good experience as well. But I do, yeah. And also I often think, I'm like, how lovely, you know, could it be for her? Maybe she probably may not even need her, may not be interested. That's another thing. You're kind of, if I was to send her an email, if I was to say hello to her in the street tomorrow, she might have absolutely no interest. But to have someone down the road, let's say, to say, oh, would you mind calling up and help me with this? Or not even, would you call up for half an hour and I've got some baking? Like things like that, which you don't have in London because people rent and move on and kicked out of their houses so often that like, to foster like a feeling of neighbourhood and community here can be quite hard, especially when you're coming from another country.
Yeah, big time.
And also, I think there's such a beauty in like friendship of different ages. And actually, Máiréad,
Yes,
you're so good at this, like on set. You know, if there's like kids or I want to say elderly, but that's or like much older actors on set. You
And
always find elderly actors. You always find something to connect with them, and then like foster these like really beautiful friendships. And I think that's so unique to like. We're lucky because we get to do that in
We're
our
so
job. We're put in a work
lucky, yeah.
environment where that's like a normal thing, where you can have like a best friend who's 80 or a best friend 8, and lots of people obviously don't get those experiences. But it's so nice because you learn so much from people of different ages, and if they're not a family member as well, there's not those expectations of like it feels so refreshing.
Yeah, completely.
There
you can
is-
just be completely
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
There's like two things that I've taken from this. And one of them is like, it's very similar to your story, but yours is very emotional. Like it's about the emotions that overtake, you know, the feeling that's brought through on those emotions. Yours was quite physical in terms of like jumping into a river, but it's the same level of overthinking it in your head to paralysis and then wanting to do nothing, which I find very interesting because it's the same feeling, whether it's physical or emotional. And then the other one is to come back to expectations. Like sometimes it's very easy to have those connections because they're structured, same way as the improv, right, to a degree or whatever. Because like the chip shop guy, like you were able to let your guard down a bit because you knew that like that was the dynamic. You come in, you get your chips, you know, like and also that's so funny too. Like in Belfast, we had the same situation with a guy in the student area, and our friend had a tab, and he went so much that like he actually got gout at the age of 18. Oh my god! Okay? And we called him. Oh my god! We called him, and it's my best line to this day: the Great Goutsby and Mrs. Goutfire.
That's really
Like,
funny.
Mrs. Goutfire. But like that's sort of like you're able to go in and you're like, they don't expect anything more from me than this. And maybe on set it's the same of like, we're in this and it's gonna end here. And when it's in those unknown, or even in that moment where she hit her head, it's like, I want to make sure this woman is safe. But when it comes to the ambiguity of like, and then you start to overthink what they expect from you, that's when people shut down. And it's good to know that, because that's where when it happens to us, sometimes we can be like, what did I do wrong? But it's not really about you, it's about the other person and what they're sort of going through in their head.
Because even as well, I remember in the moment when she was like, I don't know, when I was like, oh, do you want me to go back like with you? I can walk you back. And she was like, no, I don't know if you want. Like, I was like, this woman really doesn't want me to, but I wouldn't forgive myself if I let her go and then something happened. Do you know what I mean? It's like one of those ones. And even when I think back now, I think I'd be that forceful. Back then, and sorry, not forceful, but you know what I mean? I'd be front-footed. Back then, I wouldn't. It would have been a real like achievement for me to have been that front-footed with it. But a beautiful hour-long chat came out of it, and it was. I think,
special and sacred.
Really special. Yeah.
Well, guys, it's been the most special hour with you guys, honestly.
Lovely.
I feel like we didn't even have to follow any script or questions or anything. Like, it was just so natural with you all. And it's been such a pleasure to have you in here. It really, truly is just such a testament to you guys as friends.
And you guys.
To act so
Yeah.
naturally in this room.
Thank you so much for having us,
No,
guys.
honestly, it's been
gorgeous.
such an
Such
honour.
a joy.
Really lovely.
Really.
Yeah, and we hope to see you on many more screens in the future and on many more podcasts as well.
That's what we were hoping
and
for.
no expectations.
No
but
expectations.
Let's go for a drink or, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, will I send you an email and you'll email me back?
No emails.
What if I hit my head?
No, but all the love, guys. Thank you so much for coming on In Their
Thank
Shoes by
you.
Seanchoíche. Cheers. Join us next time to walk in more people's shoes, hear stories around different themes, and have more great discussions. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and we look forward to you joining us next time to connect through the power of shared storytelling.